listen-only mode.
Hey everybody, this is Karen. I'm going to wait a couple more minutes to start to make sure everybody has time to log in. All right. Hopefully a few more people will continue to log on, but I am going to go ahead and get us started. We have a lot to cover today, and so I want us to be able to use the time as effectively as we can and jump right in. So this is the long-awaited Shark Tank session, and what that means is that starting in just a few minutes, you are going to hear from at least 5 different groups who are going to give you a quick tour through their idea of what mini grant work has already been done, how it might be sustained, and some new ideas as well. And the goal of this is really to give a quick tour of what we already think some of the mini grant ideas could be that we'll spend time thinking about in June, and then to get some feedback about whether we should continue pursuing these ideas and how we as a community might use the results from those. So we are going to open the floor for ideas in 2 different ways. After each of the sets of PowerPoints that you're about to see, we will open the floor for conversation and have you answer a few set questions. Then at the very end, we will open the floor for any new ideas that we haven't already covered. So if you're on the line and you didn't feel like you were quite ready to use the template, but you do have an idea that you'd like to toss out to the group to get some feedback on, you will have your chance as well. And so there will be some time devoted for that at the end. And so without further ado, I thought I had a slide in here, but I don't see it. So as you're listening, I'm going to go first, just because I thought, it was fair for me to be in the hot seat first since nobody else knows what's coming. So I'm going to present first. And when we get to the end, I'm going to ask you guys to share share feedback in response to the same kinds of questions. And let me tell you what those are really quickly so you can think about them as we go. One is what the strengths of the method are. The other side of that is ways to make that method stronger. And then I want everybody to think about and be ready to talk about how the results from that method would either be beneficial to your festival as an individual member of this group, or how it would benefit the festival community. So that's sort of where we're going with the feedback, and that will be used by each team to decide whether and how to pursue these ideas, or by you guys if you decide you want to submit a mini grant on one of these topics or something else that these help sort of catalyze for you. So here we go. So the first one is something that has sort of jointly been done by the EvalFest team and the North Carolina Science Festival team. So Jen and Taylor played critical roles in helping collect data across the state. The Science Festival team and Todd helped us sort of leverage lots of different resources, including the festival calendar, to try to get the data that we wanted and needed for this. And so here it is. This method is Speak Your Truth, which is a festival truth booth. And you can see Jen is inside the booth at this point. This is at one of our festival events several weeks ago. And this is what the booth currently looks like. What do we think we could learn from this? So the big idea behind this is that, we assume that people who come to festival events, or some people assume that people who come to festival events are different from people who don't go to festival events. But I don't know that there's really a lot of data to support that claim. And so what we intended to do with Speak Your Truth was take it to free large public events that focused on science and those that didn't, and have people answer the same prompts and see what kind of differences we got in the feedback that came through. We've had some success with that, so you will see some data in a few minutes, but we were, we ended up being put in a science area of the non-science events that we were trying to target, and so we were still talking to science people. So we have not yet been as successful as we thought we would have been by now in going to a non-science event and getting those data. So we're still working on that part. Here's how it works. So it is designed to go to free public events and be a booth like any other booth you might see. It's currently operated by 2 people, which I think is a flaw in the design that could be rectified if people are interested in pursuing it. Currently, we're using 3 different prompts. You'll see those in a second, and those run on a loop. Each person gets up to 1.5 minutes to respond to that prompt in whatever way they feel necessary. We audio record the responses, and then we match those with an ID number to the core questions that are the demographic items that we use for EvalFest. And then everybody gets this awesome sticker that you see shown here once they're done with that particular, with speaking their truth. So what did people say? Some of the answers are pretty simple. So the thing about science is that it's awesome. So we have a number of responses where people just shared feedback. One of the things that I did appreciate about the data we already have, we have data from about 75 people, is that some people just said they don't like it. And so it's nice that the booth seems to pull both positive and negative impressions. This is somebody who's at a science event and maybe got dragged there by their folks, who knows. And then we have some responses that are a little bit more nuanced. So for me, science is uncovering new truths. This one I really like because it goes on to talk about the process that this person plays in contributing to society and using science to do that. And so we have some feedback that's sort of affective. We have some feedback that starts to define what science is and get at the role that science plays in people's identities. We have a couple of more, well, just longer responses, not necessarily more sophisticated. The first one here you'll see starts to focus a little bit on the current political landscape when it comes to science and the importance of science and scientists, which I liked. And then some people just go straight to a content place in their responses, not a lot, but these sort of show the full range of responses that we're seeing so far from the data points we have. And so when I think about what we might do with these data and how we might code them, I think this framework from Friedman is maybe a good starting place. I think we could go through these and do a really quick code about it to say, what are people talking about? Is it knowledge? Is it a skill? Is it their attitude about science? Is it their identity, which isn't on this list, but I think should be added given the responses we have so far. So this is how I think we might start coding it. I know Jen has lots of ideas about how to code the data as well. And so we'll be pulling that together and thinking about how to start to make meaning of these as we try to identify a non-science event to take the booth to. How can others be involved? You can help us figure out how to jump the logistical hurdles of this thing. It is currently, there are things about it that make it easy to travel, and there are things about it that make it an absolute pain to try to lug around. So there are some logistical hurdles if this is truly going to be something that the whole community can use. We could use some help thinking about the range of prompts and the range of audiences that answer those prompts. And then eventually, assuming other people do pick this up and want to run with it, there would be potential to have other teams help with the coding of the data and then helping in publishing the data. So that's sort of my quick tour. What we're asking everybody to do is take 5 minutes or less and then open it up for discussion. And so I'm gonna do that now. These are the questions. You guys are the sharks in this setup. And so if you want to type a question into the chat, if you want to raise your hand, then we can let you know, we can sort of open your mic and let you ask your question so that everybody can hear it. Oops, sorry, I'm clicking like crazy and it's not helping. I want this to go away. There, sorry. So anybody want to talk about strengths of this idea, ways to make it even better, or ways that you would or would not use this? So let's not assume that all of the ideas today are going to be good and helpful. And so if this feels like it's not good and helpful, or it's interesting but really not going to help the cause, then let us know that. And Roshni, I see you've had your hand raised for a while. Do you have a comment?
Hi, did you call me?
Yes. Hey.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so I was wondering, so you'd have to have people come to the tent, right, in order to do this, right? So they'd have to be interested in getting sort of buy-in to get them to the tent, right?
Yeah, and that's why we ended up having 2 people. So one person was always out front inviting people to speak their truth, and the other person was sort of in charge of actually getting the person set up in the booth and getting the data.
I was wondering about maybe making it more mobile, even having some, the prompts on T-shirts and people walking around with the prompts on T-shirts and like really mobile, recording it with iPhones and iPhone lapel mics and just walking around and really making it a mobile experience where people see you, they see the prompt, and they decide they want to interact as a way of really getting people to interact more with the booth.
I like that. It's certainly lighter than the tent that we bought. So in that way, it's a definite plus. Taylor, it looks like there were a bunch of people who also had questions. Do you have any questions for me?
Yep, the first one is from Kishore, and it was, how many audio responses were you able to get per event on average?
So we got about 50 responses at an event that lasted, Taylor, how long were you guys there? 5 hours? 4 hours?
9 to 4.
But you weren't collecting data from 9 to 4.
No, yeah, 4 hours, 5 hours.
4 hours. Yeah. So 10 to 15 an hour is what we're averaging.
And then the second is from Jeremy, and he said, might be interesting to try this at a sneaky science type event where more people are not science enthusiasts.
Yeah, that's actually what we thought we were going to do last weekend, and it flopped. We got stuck in a location with a pop-up science activity, and it turned out that the only people who came to that were science people. And so we tried that and failed. But if it was something like your art walk that is more consistently not science, I think it would be perfect for something like a sneaky science.
And then we have one from Laura. She said, I wonder about using an intercept survey instead of or in addition to the booth. I think we could get lots of data.
Yeah, I wondered about that too. And I do have really nice microphones that we could use if people wanted to try that as an alternative as well. All right, I am gonna cut questions there. I'm trying to keep a good eye on the clock and shift over to our next group. If you have other questions, please type them out. We'll print out the chat once this is over and I can answer them afterward. We're also going to ask people to weigh in on these and whether you think any of these ideas are things you might want to pursue yourself in a quick survey that you'll get either tomorrow or Monday. So there will be a chance to provide extra feedback later. All right, Jeremy and Richard, let me see. So Jeremy, I just unmuted you. Are you presenting? Or are you both presenting? How are you guys going to handle it?
Richard will present.
Okay, and Richard, you're unmuted now too, so take it away.
Yeah, so I'm the evaluator for this, and Jeremy is the executive director for the festival, and I thought I would just quickly do this. So can we go to the next slide? Can you do that?
Yep, you got it.
Okay, so basically we had a series of questions we've been thinking about for a number of years, which are pretty obvious questions. You know, that question of why do people go to science festivals? And we were also interested in why provider organizations get involved, because there are so many in the elaborate kind of festival that Jeremy is involved with nearly 2,000 events throughout the state. There are all kinds of different providers, and we wanted to know what they thought their reasons were for getting involved, as well as why general visitors go. And when we started working with John Falk, who I'll talk about in a moment, people were saying, he was saying particularly, we should think about what providers think are the reasons people go to festivals. So those who are presenting science and those who are consuming science, are they thinking the same things, and do they have the same motivations and reasons? So those were the basic questions we started thinking about for our mini grant. So if we move to the next slide, what we were really trying to learn about were the motivations. So what are the motivations of those who get involved in festivals, both visitors and providers, as I said. We wanted to know whether these motivations matched each other, whether our understanding for those who are providing information matches. Do they have a good understandings of how and in what ways, for what reasons visitors attend? And in working with John Falk, who I think most people know has done a lot of work on motivations for going to science museums, he came up with 5 motivations. And I think if people look down that list quickly, they'll recognize their visitors to their festivals in various ways. But we thought that, in fact, something more complex is going on, and it may not actually map exactly in the same, for the same reasons that people go to science festivals. So if you see that list, we think there are certainly people who have that as their main reason, but the reasons people have for going is complex. So we could just move to the next slide. The reason we were interested in this topic at all is the work that Falk has done suggests that motivations are really significant. They determine what people are looking for in an experience before they go. They determine what experience people actually have when they go there. And that motivation and that expectation determines how satisfied they are with the experiences they have. And more significantly, that it also determines to a large extent what they remember and what they learn. So we think that really understanding in complex ways what people's motivations are and how they operate is really significant for the success of science festivals. So we could move forward. What do we know? We've talked to about 400 people recently at the last festival in various locations around the state. And I've just put up a series of reasons that people gave. And these turn out to be quite complex, and people don't have a reason, they seem to have several reasons, and we're interested in which reasons go together and do they make types of motivations. And at this point, we're trying to, what I'm calling, embrace the complexity, not just have a single or simple check off of the reasons people are coming, but we really want to explore what's going on. So we've begun this process, and we're still collecting data, and we're still looking at the patterns. But we've done about 400 so far of festival attendees. So if we move to the next slide, we've also done a series of focus groups, and we look back at past data that we collected over the last 6 years at the festivals in Arizona, and we found the percentage that are shown here. We found this sort of array of different motivations for people providing services and being at the festivals, doing the scientists, why are they involved, and the school districts, why are they involved. These percentages are the percentage of those saying they strongly agreed. So I'm just simplifying the data. But again, we want to look at what goes with what are there different forms of motivation, and does that set up expectations in providers, and do they match the motivations and the reasons for attending by visitors. So that's a really quick view. How can others be involved? We are developing and have pretty much developed what we think is the list across the spectrum of motivations we've found for going to science festivals. We would like other people to comment simply on, do they recognize these motivations? Do they say others we've missed? Have they gathered any similar information? Would you be willing to share that? And we want to go further with this, and we would like to partner with other festivals to gather some of this information, perhaps using our instruments or our techniques, which are both focus groups and surveys. And we want to produce a larger data set and do this activity called Q-sort, which is a way of getting to individual patterns of reasons on both the provider and the visitor side. We're continuing to work with John Falk on this, and we put in an NSF grant in last year, which we didn't get, and we're going to apply again this, and we're really looking for partners we'll take this forward in some form regardless, but it would be really well involved. That's it.
Thanks, Richard.
Okay.
Anybody with questions or reactions to the motivation study? You can type those into the chat or raise your hand, either one.
Laura Heisler had a comment.
Okay.
And she said, this is great. We have done some related work with focus groups. We also asked what might keep people away, i.e. demotivators. We would possibly be interested in collaborating.
That would be great. Yeah. Thank you. The demotivation is a really interesting area. I'd like to encourage that.
Roshni, do you have another question, or is your hand up from before?
Oh, from before, sorry.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Again, if you have more questions, go ahead and type them into the chat, and we'll circle back to them at the end. St. Pete and Kaya, let me find you on the list so that I can unmute your mic. Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm talking about what we did here at St. Petersburg, and later we did at the Jacksonville Science Festival this past year as part of the mini grant. If you want to go to the next screen. What we did was observing child engagement at festival exhibits. When you look at child exhibit engagement, such as a child asking questions, doing an activity, reading or playing with an exhibit, it's seen as a proxy for learning. Surveys can ask why they interacted, but tracking actually observes what they actually did. rather than their self-reported activities. Next slide. So what exactly did we do? Here's a map of the St. Petersburg Science Festival from last year, 2016, in October, as well as some of the pictures of the actual instrument. We hired 7 university students to participate as trackers in the study. They were trained the day before during our school day. Children were randomly sampled at 5 different entrances to the festival. There's 5 different places where people generally come in. The sampling method was similar as with the visitor survey. Trackers were trained to observe and record the child's activity while they were engaged in the exhibit. So specifically, looking when was marked down when a child was actively looking right in front of the exhibit at it, as well as talking to an exhibitor, doing the actual activity, talking to a parent or guardian while they were actually at the exhibit, and so forth. Later on, 5 of these same students, we went up to the Jacksonville Science Festival, and the process was really very similar at that festival. Pretty much the only difference was that Jacksonville had a more controlled entrance. So there, the random sampling was when children entered into the festival. And then at 11 o'clock, some of our trackers moved to the food truck area. And when people finished their meals, they started sampling when they went back to the festival and started engaging. Next slide. So what have we learned so far? I've only started doing the data analysis, descriptive statistics from the St. Pete Science Festival, and so I haven't started looking at the Jacksonville Science Festival at all. So for St. Petersburg, we sampled or observed a total of 83 children who were tracked for up to 25 minutes. Among these, 41 were female and 42 were male. We found that 99% of the children visited at least one exhibit, and you can see the other numbers here. Boyd Hill, which this is a picture from, which is a nature preserve, and it's also rescue for owls and other birds of prey, was our most frequented exhibit, and it was visited 19% of the children visited the Boyd Hill exhibit at some point. The range really varied across. One child went to 10 different exhibits, and one child didn't stop at all. He just went straight in and straight across from one side and then left. So next slide. So our trackers had a stopwatch as part of the instrument, and they were looking at the wait time. So when a child approached and stood and get direct, and we found that the wait time was pretty low, had no wait time at all, and then most of them had less than 15 seconds. But some kids did try and wait a little bit and then move on and never actually stop at the actual exhibit. What I found was interesting was things that I'd like to call high value exhibits. And the question I get asked is why am I defining it as a high value? Because multiple children were willing to stop and wait for that exhibit, that they wanted to do it so much that they decided to wait rather than just quickly move on or not approach it. And also that these were exhibits that at least 4 to 8 children stopped at throughout the day. So many children stopped at these ones and they were willing to wait. If you want to go to the next slide. So 60% of the children did an activity at their first 4 stops, and 20% of the children actually talked to an exhibitor. Talking to an exhibitor is considered an important aspect of our science festival, that we like to get the scientists actually talking to the children and representing or speaking to them directly. I found that at the first stop, children spent around 2.5 minutes on average engaging in an actual activity of their first stop, and this increased with each subsequent stop to their fifth stop. So from their first to second to third to fourth to fifth stop, their time at the actual exhibits spending engaged in the activity increased to their fifth stop, where they were there engaging in an activity for around on average 4 minutes. Girls spent more time engaged in activities than the boys. And the engagement time also really ranged, that you had children that came, did something for 30 seconds and moved on really quick and went bam, bam, bam from exhibit to exhibit, to one child that spent 15 minutes actually engaging at that one exhibit for the entire 15-minute time. There were a pattern of children that had high engagement. Many of these children came earlier in the morning, and they overall during the 25 minutes spent a higher percentage of the time, at least 15 minutes more, actively engaged in the exhibits rather than walking from exhibit to exhibit, stop to stop. And even here, this is where you can see that there were more girls than boys that were more actively engaged in spending actual time there. And these high engaged children went on to an average of 6 different stops. What I also found was a range from passive to active engagement. So the trackers were tracking what type of engagement the students or the kids were doing. So were they doing an activity? Were they talking to an exhibitor? Were they looking at the exhibit? And as the number of stops increased, so if a child went to more stops, they became more passive. So they were doing their more active engagements in the exhibits of doing the activity or talking was at their earlier stops. But once they hit 5, 6 stops, they just started looking more. Even if they stayed there, they started just not actually doing anything or talking and engaging. Next slide. So where am I now? Tomorrow is the last day of our semester. Yay! And working on these data analysis is a big project for me over the summer. As I said, there's the Jacksonville Science Festival results for me to look at and keep on looking at the statistical analysis. A co-researcher of mine will be presenting, and a student tracker will be presenting at the ISPEC conference this summer in Madison. And for this, we're going to talk about the method in more detail. But what we really did was the story mapping to use the actual tracks that students or the children did as they navigated through to highlight the exhibits and where they went and how they moved overall. So we have some examples of that. Ultimately, my goal is to write up these results for an article. So how can others be involved? I'm happy to work with any festival that might be interested in collecting data and analyzing. We have the instrument that's been created. I think there are a few changes that could be made. And if someone else is looking at working with and actually finding trackers, training them and recruiting them and having them work throughout the day to see if they have similar different patterns of engagement and navigation, that would be great. So that is the conclusion of where we're at.
All right. Thank you, Kaya. Anybody with questions or comments about the timing and tracking study?
I have a couple of things in the chat box.
Okay.
The first one's coming from Kishore. Were the kids determining where to go, and do we have a sense of how the parents influence the engagement?
Good question. We didn't actually record that. So I'm sure some kids determined where to go and some of the parents determined where to go. But the trackers did not actually note that down.
And then do you have particular ranges of ages from Michelle Phillips?
Yeah. We were looking at kids that were elementary to middle school age. So we discounted anyone that looked really young, and we discounted anyone that looked around high school age.
And she also noted that there are some similarities with the Bay Area Science Festival Secret Shopper and would be interesting to talk about offline.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds great.
We have...
Olivia, I can see that you have your hand up. Do you still have a question or a comment?
Are you talking to Olivia? I couldn't hear you if you said.
I did. I'm sorry.
Hey, no problem. I just wanted to know a little more about the process at the beginning when the trackers linked up with the children that they were following. Did you talk to the parents or the children, or was it more of like stalking like 10 feet behind them? Like, what was that process
It was like stalking like 10 feet behind them. It was anonymous, unobtrusive observation. So the sampling of the children was the exact same method as the sampling for the visitor survey, drawing the line right by the entrance and then counting off every 5th child and following that child. The trackers would stay a variable distance, roughly probably around 10 feet away or 10 yards away, but they would move about and to stay anonymous and not noticed as the child and the family move through the festival.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Olivia. All right, I am going to move us along. Do send any extra questions you have in the chat. And then let me see, I'm going to scroll down. Roshni, are you and Suzanne going to present this together, or are you going to be in the lead?
It's just going to be me.
Okay, you have the floor.
Okay, well, we can just go ahead and go to the next slide then. So I'm coming from upstate New York. This is Science Festival Capital Region, and we are looking at using beacons, or the possibility of using beacons. So beacons are small wireless devices that use Bluetooth technology, and they basically pick up signals, and they are based off of apps. So you basically would deploy a network of beacons. They just put out signals, and people who have apps, and are you guys getting feedback? Or is that me?
I'm not getting feedback here.
Okay, so I'm just hearing feedback, but as long as it's okay on your end. So it can enable, it can trigger an experience on an app that would be on visitors' phones. And those experiences can include sending a notification, a video, URL, any form of media. And you can go to the next slide. So beacons have various applications. For one thing, they can collect data. So the beacons themselves aren't collecting data. The data is collected through the app, that whichever app is chosen. But the signal through the beacons is what's really important, and how the data is collected. So they can map the visitor journey, where the visitors are going, how long they're staying there, and you can see this is kind of like a heat map example where you can see how they're moving around the space, how long they've been in certain areas. So we can also learn questions about specific booths, because if a visitor comes near a booth, it can trigger their phone can be triggered by being near a beacon, and they can get, say, a survey question, a quick question, or say an engagement survey about the booth, and that way we can gather data about which activities are more successful. It can also trigger experiences, so we could do something, say, having STEM professionals wear beacon stickers, and when visitors are in their vicinity, their devices will be triggered, so they can choose to interact with a STEM professional. And then you can even add some gamification to that by saying, there's a STEM professional in your area, find out who it is, and they have to find out who it is by talking, or looking for the person who would be marked, and typing in, like, asking them what question they asked or something, and they get points for it. So this would be a way to sort of increase that interaction with the STEM professional that we're always looking for EvalFest. And also to get valuable data about what our visitors are doing and how they're moving throughout the festival. So how might it work? So any festival that already has an app, for one thing, I'm jealous of you. And for another thing, you can use an SDK and software development kit to make your apps beacon enabled. And there's a few different companies that are doing that. For anyone else, we could either, through, say, a mini grant, create an app that all of our EvalFest festivals can use that would be good for collecting data and analytics and triggering surveys and experiences that we decide would be beneficial for all of us. And there's several different companies that create apps like that. The beacons are very low cost, from $1 to $50 depending on the beacon. And they're very easy to connect to apps. And so we would create a network for each festival. And ideally, festivals would be able to customize the app for their own festival so they can use the beacons to enhance their content by triggering, say, like here's a video about, with extra information about I don't know, robotics after they go to a robotics table, or a push notification saying there's a performance starting in that corner of the festival in 10 minutes, things like that. So all of the data is collected by the app, which means the visitors have a clear opt-in by downloading the app, and that also means that the app needs to be something that they'd want to download, so say providing extra festival information, keep up to date on what's going on with the schedule, have extra content, things like that. And I think we can go to the next slide. And so this might think, well, the beacons are sort of the newer thing. They're much less expensive, much easier to set up. In my opinion, the buy-in is a lot easier because you just have to convince someone to download an app rather than trying to get them to, say, buy a bracelet and carrying an RFID chip around with them. So hopefully that was clear. And sorry if it wasn't.
Great.
And yeah, any questions?
Thank you, Roshni, and Suzanne by extension. All right, questions or comments from the Sharks?
We've got one in the chat box from Richard. What do you think are the most useful applications of this technology?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yep, it's what do you think are the most useful applications of this technology?
There's so many. So a lot of, right now, I think it's used in a lot of retail areas to get data on customers, where they're going, what they're doing, what they're looking at. But some museums are also using them for tours. So adding content, like if you're looking at a painting or anything that it gets triggered, do you want to look at, do you want to learn more behind the scenes about this artwork, so on. So those are both good. Those two things are really, I think, the best applications for the beacons, because it's really location based. But it's really, I think almost anything you can think of, you can probably find a way that a beacon can probably help you do it.
Nice.
And then we have, well, if you want to do you want to do some of the hands raised, or do you want to keep going with the chat?
Nope. Why don't you do another one from the chat?
Okay. We have one from Jen Gathings, and it's, do you yet have a sense of what percentage of visitors opt in to participate? Also, what kind of marketing / outreach is necessary to educate visitors about the app?
So we don't have an app yet, so I don't know what that would be. But from my own experience, if a place has an app that has added value, I will download it and I will allow notifications. So let's say it has to be something more than just the times that something is open, or even the schedule, because I can get that off a website. It has to be, say the Met app has the audio guide tour on the app. That's something added that's easy the reason that makes me want to have the app. Or Starbucks, you can use it to actually pay for your purchases, get reward points. So things like that make the app extra, because otherwise, you have to convince people to give up that limited phone space towards that app. So it needs to be more than just basic data that they can get off a website.
Nice. So I love it that that we just had that question, and that we're really just at the beginning of trying to figure out what the answer to that might be and what some of the hurdles might be, because it's a perfect example of how we were thinking about this session working, and the time that we have between now and June. So if this is an idea that people are really interested in pursuing, there could be some of the logistical kinds of questions that we answer between now and when we're all together in June, so that those are knowns, and we can think about planning beyond that. So thanks to Jen for pitching that out. That's a good example. All right, last but certainly not least, we have Kishore and Michelle, who are together. And Kishore, I just
Sorry about the feedback there for a second. Michelle's going to start, and then I'm going to come back in and talk about the results.
Yeah, so this is Michelle and Kishore here together for Bay Area Science Festival. And we're hoping to just share our experience using this secret or mystery shopper protocol at our last festival, in the hope that we can be of service to others who might be interested, and also with the hope that we can strengthen what we might learn from such a thing, both for Bay Area and for EvalFest more broadly. So the secret shopper involves a group of researchers using a particular protocol and going around to different booths, watching a set of visitors go through a booth experience, answering some introductory questions based on the researcher's own observations of the booth. And then the researcher interviews the visitors with a short series of questions. And at the very end, there's actually an audio component. This was all done on iPads. At the very end, there's an audio component where they record some of their favorite things about the booth and what they would like to see improved. So that's what it is.
Karen does it.
What will we learn? So we as festival organizers and evaluators have certain assumptions about what happens at these booths and at a festival. And this protocol allows researchers to collect information on the actual booth experience and to actually spend some quality time as a visitor, but also observing visitors. So we think it'd be interesting to see other festivals try the approach, so we have a better sense of what happens at booths in festivals overall. And specifically, this sort of information and method can help us develop, as EvalFest, help us develop a little more theory or information about the experience that visitors go through in this setting or context. And I'll explain a little bit more what I mean by that as we go through this presentation. Next slide. So what we did just logistically is we recruited 8 researchers through a variety of means. We did a posting on American Evaluation Association website, went through contacts at Exploratorium and Lawrence Hall of Science, UC Berkeley, Stanford, and the Asian Art Museum, found researchers who had experience watching visitors and collecting data. We provided them with a $200 stipend for the day, which just included everything, so we didn't have to deal with their travel. Kishore made recommendations for booths that he really wanted to have more insight about, and we developed a spreadsheet so that the researchers were sort of evenly distributed throughout those booths. We did, because it was a short timeline, we didn't have time to train the researchers before the day of the expo, so we spent an hour prior to the expo going through the protocol and having a discussion of what we meant by some of these things. Then we tried a 90-minute pilot where everyone went out and collected data. We came back together and what I call recalibrated and made decisions about how we were going to define particular things. collected more data, had another calibration, collected more data, and then had a debrief at the end, which was very helpful. And so then the data is available in QuickTap, which, as you all know, is very easy to interpret. And we have some audio files, written notes, and then the recorded debrief. Next slide. And here's Kishore.
So, hi everyone. So let's talk about what we learned. So 65 visits were recorded across 30 booths, and this is at a Seisman Expo that had about 120 booths total. So we're able to sample a high percentage. And what I really walked away from was really granular information on each booth. So how many people stopped out of a group of 10 that was going by, how long they waited, was there appropriate staffing and materials, the ratio of hands-on versus demo, both according to the shopper themselves and the individuals engaging in the activity, the nature of the instruction and engagement that was going on. And I think probably the most interesting is how the whole family, how the parents and the kids were potentially engaging around the issue. So in terms of results, like granular results I got was on wait time, 76% of those booths had no wait, but 3% of them had waits of 20 minutes or longer. And a couple of those booths actually said that they had an incredible booth experience in their post survey. So it gave me a very actionable item with them. 8% of the booths didn't have enough materials. Again, very actionable for me. And then of concern, as we advertise this expo as being almost exclusively hands-on, is that 16% reported back being almost entirely a demo without an activity, which without a hands-on activity, which really made this an interesting, again, actionable result. And the granularity from the data collectors' comments were used to really inform a lot of sponsor reports to individual sponsors. Next slide. So what have we learned? Like, I think there's some big questions that were raised when we started to dive into the data. The idea of the ratio of hands-on to demo and what works and what is appropriate based off of the reported satisfaction ratings there's still more work to be done, but it didn't line up to being hands-on, being exclusively hands-on, meaning resulting in a better experience. And then this definition of hands-on versus demo is one that we really struggled with, and the audience itself struggled with too. Even when those terms are defined, I think there's a lot of gray area there.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that I think this is something that North Carolina has wrestled with a little bit as well, and that is sort of how are we thinking about these booths, and would it be helpful for the EvalFest community, since we're sort of charged with building a literature around public science events, would it be useful for us as a community to sort of think about booth types and have maybe some kind of a typology of booth type? Would that be of value in terms of looking at a visitor's experience and contributing to the literature? So that's a broader question for us going forward, maybe something we can talk about in June.
Okay, and we have one last slide. So I think the key takeaway is somebody that's the director in terms of how I use the evaluation. I use this directly for sponsors. They actually got direct feedback on how quality of a booth experience they did in a third-party way. That validation was pretty a fantastic result for the festival itself. I think this hands-on versus demo is going to be a question that pervades the festival this year. This garnered a lot of data, and data that we're not entirely clear how to tell the story around. But we adapted the protocol that North Carolina had developed, which is on evalfest.org. And I think what's really interesting is now that there's two festivals that have done this, adding to that sort of larger data set on what's happening on a very booth level can really sum up into something that I think is worth publishing down the line, depending on how many more groups do it, while also giving you very actionable information. Obviously, there's a ton of similarities to what St. Pete did. So I think there's something to consider between both of these methodologies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll stop there, Karen.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right. Questions or comments from the floor?
Okay, we've got a couple in the chat box. We've got Jen is asking, how did you define hands-on and demo?
Yeah.
Okay, was that laugh the answer to the question? I think so. Yeah, it's Michelle, you want to? I think.
Yeah, we had a long conversation about this with the researchers, and I wish I had available to you the recording of our debrief, because there was a lot of conversation about this. And hands-on, basically, we determined that it would be that people literally were able to hold things in their hands, manipulate things with their hands. And demonstration was where they were not touching something, they were watching something and interacting perhaps with it in a visual way, but not touching something. But we also recognize that there is a continuum. And so in the protocol, we had, for the observer's perspective, it was a continuum from entirely demonstration to mostly demonstration, half and half, mostly hands-on, and entirely hands-on. So it was a continuum, but admittedly, it is very slippery, and it's, I think, a conversation that we'll continue to wrestle with.
All right, Suzanne, I can see that you've got your hand up. I unmuted your mic. Suzanne, are you there? Maybe not. Accidental hand raise. Taylor, do you have anything else on your end?
Yep, I have one from Roshni. So this wasn't traditional secret shopping of having anonymous people come in and experience the festival.
That's right. This was very actually similar to what St. Pete did with, following visitors. Not the same visitors throughout the day, but following visitors sort of anonymously at a booth.
And I can add to that because I was involved with Michelle and Amy and Catherine at different points and thinking about things. And so some of the logistical pieces that they looked at on their protocol were from the mystery shopper protocol that we developed, but then they also looked at the observation protocol that we presented in one of these webinars a year or two ago. And I'm totally blanking on who did that work, but I can share that if you want, and on some of the work that was going on in St. Pete. So we sort of took all of that into account, and then the Bay Area team picked the items and the approaches that were the best fit for what their evaluation needs and interests were, and sort of married all of those pieces together for that. All right, thank you guys. So we promised that we would sort of open the discussion to anyone else who has an idea that they would like to throw out, but didn't really feel ready to use the template. And so if you would raise your hand, I do think it's important to talk this part through. So if you have an idea that you would like to pitch, please raise your hand. And Lara, I just saw your hand go up, so you now have the floor.
This is Laura. So my idea is a little bit, I think, a combination of, and I'm blanking on who it was, but the North Carolina booth and the T-shirt idea, I guess, just really trying to get at understanding why people that aren't coming. And I've been thinking nothing very snazzy, but just kind of walking around with the quick tap iPads at other events that seem like they're attracting the kind of people that we think could be coming to the Science Festival who aren't. For example, in our community, we have a lot of family science nights at elementary schools, and participation in those tends to be really diverse.
and we don't see that same diversity at our science festival. And so I was just interested in developing and administering what we call an outgroup survey at those kinds of cognate events, and then just trying to assess, how we might change the festival or change our advertising about the festival to appeal to those folks. So it seemed like if a lot of festivals did that at appropriate non-science events or non-science festival events, we might learn something.
Excellent. For the sake of time, I'm going to hold off on gathering feedback for you, but we'll add any ideas that we get now to a quick survey that we're going to send out to everybody in the next few days, so that we can start gathering feedback and finding out who's interested in what of the ideas we've heard about today. Thanks, Lara. All right, anybody else have an idea to share? Okay, I don't see any more. If you do have an idea that comes up later and you'd like us to add it to the survey for people to respond to, then just let us know. As I said, that'll be coming out tomorrow or Monday. And what we are hoping is that you will be willing to share your current thinking about the mini grant program by the end of next week, so that we can use the time between now and the June meeting as best as we can to help people think about ideas and come armed with as much information as possible. By the end of next week, we would love it if you could answer the survey that we are going to send and have your travel arrangements made. So many of you have gotten your travel code to book your airfare, but you haven't yet booked your airfare. So please go ahead and do that so that we can update our records and have a better sense of who's coming and when everybody is going to arrive. If we look at what is coming up, we hope that many of you will choose to come to IPSEC in its entirety, or at least for as much of it as you can. We hope and expect to see all of you at 1 o'clock, so after lunch on the 6th, for the last 2 sessions of the meeting. There are going to be 2 afternoon sessions, and I had the chance to talk to Ben a little bit earlier today with Lara to talk about some of those details. Currently, it looks like the 1 o'clock session is going to be a series of flash talks. And what we're hoping is that those will include some of the people on this call, but also a broader range of public science events. And it'll be a chance for people to get up and do a quick flash talk about a best practice. Ideally a best practice in evaluation, but it doesn't have to be limited to that. So if you think you would be interested in giving a flash talk as part of that session, please let us know. You'll see a general call come out about that from the SFA sometime soon. Then the second session that day is going to be a deeper dive into the 2 mini grants that you started to hear about today. So if you want to learn much more about the motivation study that Jeremy and Richard have been working on in Arizona, or the work that Kaya has been leading in St. Pete and then in Jacksonville as well, you'll have the chance to do that in a session at IPSEC that is devoted to just those 2 topics. We will be having dinner together the evening of the 6th, and then the EvalFest meeting itself is on the 7th. And a large part of the meeting, we don't know how much yet, is probably going to be devoted to mini grants. And so we want to make sure that you know when the deadlines for those are going to be. We announced these a couple of weeks ago, but in case you didn't have the chance to tune into that webinar, I wanted to share them again. So July 14th and November 10th are the 2 mini grant deadlines for this year. And then you can see when we're hoping to have decisions back to people as well. So whether you want to start thinking about a deadline that will be in July or November, or whether you want to help somebody think about ideas, but you don't think you're necessarily ready or have the capacity to take on any mini grant work yourself. I think the more brains that we have wrapped around any of these topics and ideas, the better we're all going to be in the end. So we're hoping that the mini grant sessions that we do have at the meeting are going to be an interesting way for people to engage, even if you're not necessarily thinking about putting one of those in on your own. So that is all that we have for today. We're a little bit past time. Thank you guys for hanging out. If you do have any final questions that you would like us to answer, please put those in the chat and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We're also going to share the slides from today with everybody so that you have a copy of those and can go back and reference them and think about if there are any ideas in here that you'd like to pursue for your mini grant, or you'd like to talk to us about and help other people flesh out a little bit further. So thanks everybody who presented, especially for taking the time to help everybody learn about the awesome ideas that are already out there and some new ones that might be coming down the pike. And we will see you guys all in person in about a month in Madison. Have a great month, everybody. Bye.